The heavy oak door slammed shut, and the unmistakable metallic click of a deadbolt echoed through the penthouse office. Emma stared at that empty digital trash bin on her monitor, her heart hammering violently against her ribs. She had just permanently deleted a file containing $50 million in illicit syndicate payouts. Now the most dangerous man in Chicago was standing between her and the only exit, slowly unbuttoning his suit jacket. What happened next wasn't murder. It was a dark, twisted beginning. The 42nd floor of the Costa Global Holdings Tower was usually a ghost town by 8 o'clock on a Friday night, but Emma Gallagher was used to the silence. While the rest of the city below was vibrating with the chaotic energy of a rainy Chicago evening, Emma was safely anchored to her ergonomic chair, the blue light of 3 oversized monitors reflecting in her dark, focused eyes. Emma was not the typical executive assistant one expected to see in the cutthroat, hyper-glamorous world of high-level logistics. She was a fat woman, a size 20, with soft, generous curves, thick thighs, and a plush, rounded stomach that she refused to hide beneath the drab, oversized tents society expected her to wear. Instead, she dressed impeccably in tailored emerald green wrap dresses, sharply structured blazers, and wide trousers that commanded space. She knew how she was perceived by the waif-like, gossiping receptionists in the lobby. She had heard the whispers of women like Chloe and Jessica, who thrived on celery juice and spite, wondering out loud how someone of her size had secured the highly coveted position of personal assistant to Gabriel Costa. The answer was brutally simple. Emma was a genius. She possessed a terrifyingly efficient, steel-trap mind. She didn't crumble under pressure. She didn't ask stupid questions. And most importantly, she didn't bat an eyelash when Gabriel Costa's logistics business occasionally required untraceable shipments to be rerouted through the port of Miami at 3 in the morning. Gabriel Costa was a phantom of a man. The CEO of Costa Global was a 34-year-old titan of industry, with sharp Mediterranean features, pitch-black hair, and a gaze so intensely predatory it made most employees stutter and break out in hives. He was wealthy beyond measure, entirely merciless, and rumored to be the undisputed head of the Chicago Cosa Nostra. Emma had never asked for confirmation of the rumors. It wasn't her business. Her business was keeping his schedule immaculate, his digital footprint pristine, and his coffee exactly 180 Fahrenheit. But tonight, the comfortable boundaries of their strictly professional relationship were about to be shattered. Before you leave, I need you to scrub the Q3 temporary servers, Gabriel had told her earlier that afternoon, his deep, gravelly voice washing over her desk. He had been standing just a little too close, the intoxicating scent of Tom Ford tobacco vanille and rain clinging to his bespoke charcoal suit. Arthur said, "There's a massive accumulation of corrupted cache files dragging down the encrypted network. Delete the temp drive. All of it. I need the bandwidth clear for a major data transfer at midnight." "Understood, Mr. Costa," she had replied, keeping her voice even despite the flutter in her chest. Gabriel never looked at her with the thinly veiled disdain she received from others. When he looked at Emma, his dark eyes tracked over her full figure with an unreadable, smoldering weight that left her breathless and confused. But she always pushed those thoughts away. A man like Gabriel Costa did not look twice at his fat, sensible assistant. Now, alone in the cavernous, glass-walled office, the storm raging outside mirroring the quiet hum of the servers, Emma cracked her knuckles and brought up the Z drive. Arthur Pendleton, the company's twitchy, perpetually sweating chief financial officer, had flagged a specific directory for purging. It was labeled simply, "Sysakai Erupted." Emma took a sip of her lukewarm black coffee and began running the standard deletion protocols. The progress bar crawled across the screen. 45%, 70%. She loved the quiet of the office. She loved the feeling of being indispensable. Growing up, Her weight had always made her feel like a target, a massive, unavoidable target for cruelty. But here, behind the fortress of her monitors, she was a god. She controlled the flow of information for a billionaire. She was powerful. The progress bar hit 99% and then stalled. Emma frowned, leaning closer to the screen. A single subfolder was resisting the batch deletion. She double-clicked it, intending to manually force the scrub. The folder was heavily encrypted, buried beneath 3 layers of hidden directories, entirely out of place for a standard cache file. Its title was an alphanumeric mess, Z99A protocol. Back. Arthur's attached note in the system log was clear: directory corrupted. Fatal errors. Force delete immediately. Emma hesitated for a fraction of a second. The back of her neck prickled. The quiet of the office suddenly felt less comforting and more like a vacuum. But Arthur was the CFO, and Gabriel had explicitly told her to follow Arthur's technical request to clear the drive. She right-clicked the file. She selected Delete. A warning prompt flashed violently in red. Warning, this action cannot be undone. Bypass recycle bin? Emma pressed yes. The screen blinked. The fan on the tower whirred into overdrive, and with a soft digital ping, the file was gone. The server breathed a sigh of relief, bandwidth instantly jumping back to optimal levels. Emma exhaled, rolling her shoulders to release the tension. Job done. She reached for her purse, ready to head out into the rainy Chicago night, order a massive plate of pad thai, and fall into bed. But then, the system auto-generated a recovery log, a standard IT protocol that showed a tiny text-only preview of the exact data that had just been permanently eradicated. Emma's eyes dropped to the preview text. Her blood turned to ice. The glowing white text on the black terminal screen was only a fragment, a ghost of what had just been erased, but it was enough to make the air in Emma's lungs completely evaporate. It wasn't a cache file. It wasn't corrupted data. Payment 44. A. Alderman Thomas Fitzgerald, $250,000 cleared. Payment 44. B. Deputy Chief O'Connor, CPD $400,000 cleared. Account routing. Petrov Syndicate, Operations Q3, $50,000. Pending verification. Emma's hands began to shake violently. The coffee mug slipped from her trembling fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor, sending a dark, hot splatter across the hem of her green trousers. She didn't even flinch. She had just deleted the Costa family's master shadow ledger. "No, no, no, no," she whispered, her voice sounding thin and terrified in the empty room. Her thick, manicured fingers flew across the keyboard, initiating every recovery protocol she had ever learned. She ran deep system restores. She frantically pinged the backup servers. Access denied, file erased. 0-byte remnant. The file had been coded with a self-destruct script upon manual deletion. Whoever put it in the trash directory had designed it to vanish permanently, untraceably, without leaving a single digital footprint. The realization hit her like a physical blow, knocking the breath from her heavy chest. Arthur Pendleton, the twitchy, sweating CFO. He had deliberately renamed the mob's most critical financial ledger, disguised it as corrupted trash, and instructed Gabriel to have her delete it. Arthur was stealing the $50 million meant for the Russian Petrov Syndicate, and he was framing Emma for the destruction of the money trail. Panic, raw and suffocating, clawed at her throat. The Petrovs were merciless. Gabriel Costa was even worse. If Gabriel couldn't produce that ledger at the midnight meeting, which was only 4 hours away, the Russians would assume Costa had robbed them. There would be a mob war that would turn the streets of Chicago into a slaughterhouse, and Gabriel would know exactly whose terminal had executed the deletion. Emma grabbed the edge of her desk, her knuckles turning white. She had to run. She had to grab her bag, take the private elevator down to the parking garage, and drive until she hit the Canadian border. She was a fat, ordinary woman who liked romance novels and baking. She was not equipped to survive a mob execution. She pictured her own body dumped in Lake Michigan, all because she clicked a button. She scrambled out of her chair, her thick thighs knocking painfully against the heavy mahogany desk. She grabbed her leather tote bag, her hands shaking so badly she dropped her keys twice. Tears of pure terror pricked the corners of her eyes. Ding! The sound of the private executive elevator arriving at the 42nd floor froze the blood in her veins. The heavy steel doors slid open. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, and heavy. The distinct sound of expensive Italian leather shoes echoing against the marble floors of the reception area. Emma stopped breathing. She was trapped. There was only one way out of the executive suite, and he was walking right through it. Gabriel Costa stepped into the dim light of the outer office. He looked like a god of war stepping off a battlefield. His dark suit was damp from the rain, his tie loosened, his collar unbuttoned to reveal a sliver of olive skin. His sharp jaw was clenched, and his dark, fathomless eyes immediately locked onto her through the glass walls of his office. He didn't look like a CEO right now. He looked like exactly what the FBI claimed he was, a ruthless, bloodthirsty mafia boss. "Emma," his voice boomed, sending a shiver down her spine that was equal parts sheer terror and inappropriate, magnetic pull. "You're still here." She choked on the word, discreetly trying to push her tote bag under the desk with her foot. "I was just finishing up the server wipe, Mr. Costa." Gabriel walked into her office, the sheer size of him making the spacious room suddenly feel microscopic. He paused, looking down at the shattered coffee mug on the floor, the dark liquid seeping into the expensive rug. His dark eyebrows pulled together. "You're shaking," he observed, his voice dropping an octave, becoming softer, more dangerous. He stepped closer, invading her personal space. The heat radiating off his large body enveloped her. "Are you all right, Mia Cara?" He had never called her that before. "My dear." Emma looked up at him, her chest heaving. She was a dead woman walking. She had two choices, lie and die when he found out the truth in 10 minutes, or confess and die right here, right now. "Mr. Costa," Emma said, her voice cracking, tears finally spilling over her thick lashes and tracking down her flushed, round cheeks. "I need you to listen to me very carefully, and I need you to know that I did not do this on purpose." Gabriel's expression went completely blank. The handsome, formidable face turned to stone. The air in the room grew instantly heavy, charged with a lethal electricity. "Did what, Emma?" he asked softly. "The file," she sobbed, clutching her hands to her chest. "The corrupted file Arthur told me to delete. It wasn't cache data, Gabriel. It was the Petrov ledger, and I just wiped it from the mainframe." Forever, silence fell over the room. It was a loud, deafening, terrible silence. Gabriel just stared at her. His eyes flicked to the blank computer monitors, then back to her tear-stained, terrified face. Slowly, without breaking eye contact with her, Gabriel reached behind him. He grabbed the heavy brass handle of the solid oak door to the office. With a forceful shove, he slammed it shut. Click, he turned the deadbolt. The sound of the lock snapping into place echoed like a gunshot. Emma backed up instinctively, her calves hitting the edge of her chair. There was nowhere left to go. She was locked inside a soundproof penthouse office with a man who could snap her neck with one hand. Gabriel slowly turned back to face her. The calmness of his demeanor was far more terrifying than if he had started yelling. He reached up, his long, scarred fingers gripping the knot of his silk tie. With a fluid, practiced motion, he pulled it loose and tossed it onto the leather sofa. Next went the suit jacket. "Do you know what you just told me, Emma?" Gabriel asked, his voice a low, lethal purr. He began to stalk toward her, his movements predatory and smooth. "I know," she cried, shrinking back, her hands coming up in a desperate gesture of defense. "I know, Gabriel. I swear to God I didn't know what it was until the recovery log showed a preview." Arthur told me to run a force delete on the Q3 cache. I have his email. I have the system logs." Gabriel stopped inches from her. She was tall, but he still towered over her. She looked up at him, expecting to see murder in his eyes. Instead, she saw a blazing, intense fire that she couldn't quite decipher. He didn't pull a gun. He didn't wrap his hands around her throat. Instead, Gabriel placed a heavy, warm hand on the desk beside her hip, caging her in. He leaned down, his face so close to hers she could feel the heat of his breath on her trembling lips. His eyes dropped to her mouth, then tracked down the rapid rise and fall of her heavy, soft breasts against the green silk of her dress. "Arthur," Gabriel murmured, the name sounding like a curse on his tongue. "Arthur set you up." "Yes," Emma gasped, a fresh wave of tears hitting her. "He framed me. He knew the server logs would show my terminal executing the command. He's trying to steal the Petrov money and use me as the scapegoat. You have to believe me, please. I'm just an assistant. I don't care about your money. I just want to go home and eat my pad thai and live." A short, dark chuckle rumbled deep in Gabriel's chest. It was the most shocking sound she could have imagined in that moment. "You want to eat pad thai," Gabriel repeated, a strange, dark amusement dancing in his lethal eyes. He lifted his other hand, and Emma flinched, closing her eyes tight. But the pain never came. Instead, she felt the rough pad of his thumb gently swipe across her cheek, catching a stray tear. The touch was impossibly gentle, sending a shockwave of heat straight down her spine. Her eyes snapped open. "You think I'm going to kill you, Bea?" he asked softly, his thumb resting against her jawline. "Aren't you?" she whispered, trembling under his touch. Gabriel leaned in, his nose brushing lightly against hers. "If I wanted you dead, little bird, you would have never heard the lock click. You would already be gone." Emma's mind short-circuited. She couldn't process the sensory overload. The fear of imminent death was violently colliding with the undeniable, scorching physical chemistry radiating between them. He was so close. He was touching her, not with disgust, not with pity, but with a fierce, possessive grip that made her knees weak. "Arthur has made a fatal miscalculation," Gabriel murmured, his eyes locking onto hers. "He thought he could use my most prized possession as a pawn. He thought I would be so blinded by rage over the Petrov ledger that I would dispose of you without asking questions." Emma's heart skipped a beat. "Prized possession? I don't understand," she stammered. Gabriel's hand slid from her jaw down to her waist, his large palm spreading over the soft, plush curve of her hip. He gripped her firmly, pulling her flush against his hard, muscular body. Emma gasped at the contact. The sheer solidness of him pressed against her soft curves. "I've spent 6 months watching you, Emma," Gabriel confessed, his voice dropping into a dark, raw register. 6 months watching you run my empire from this desk. Watching the way you bite your lip when you read the shipping manifests. Watching the way your body moves in these beautiful dresses. Do you have any idea how much self-control it has taken for me not to lock this door every single night you worked late?" Emma was paralyzed. The Mafia boss, the billionaire, the man who could have any supermodel in Chicago, was obsessed with her. Her, the fat girl from the South Side, Gabriel. She breathed, his name slipping from her lips without permission. "Arthur is a dead man," Gabriel stated, his tone suddenly shifting back to ruthless business, though his hands remained firmly anchored on her hips. "He's likely already on a private jet, trying to reach non-extradition territory. My men will find him before he crosses the Atlantic. But right now, we have a much bigger problem." He pulled slightly away, though he kept one hand resting intimately on her waist. "The Petrov meeting is in 3 hours, Gabriel said, glancing at the blank monitors. "Without that ledger, Ivan Petrov will assume I'm holding his 50 million hostage. He will shoot me in the head, and then he will send his men here to slaughter everyone in this building, including you." The bubble of dark romance instantly popped, reality crashing back down on Emma like an anvil. "Can your IT team recover it?" she asked frantically. "My IT team doesn't know about this ledger. Only Arthur, me, and now you," Gabriel said. He looked at her, his dark eyes piercing right through her soul. "You know my systems better than anyone, Emma. You're the smartest person I have ever met. I need you to find a back door. A ghost file, a temporary hex code cache, anything." "Gabriel, it was a self-destructing 0-byte wipe," Emma cried. "It's gone." "Nothing is ever truly gone," Gabriel said, stepping back and gesturing to the desk. "You have 3 hours, Emma. If you can't find a trace of that file, we are both going to die tonight." Emma stared at him. The sheer gravity of the situation pressed down on her shoulders. She looked at the blank screens, then back to the man who had just confessed his dark, twisted obsession with her. "And if I find it?" she asked, her voice trembling, but finding a sudden core of steel. Gabriel smiled, a slow, predatory smirk that made her stomach flip. "If you find it, Miyakara," he whispered, "I am going to keep you." Forever, Emma swallowed hard. She turned around, pulled her keyboard close, and began to type. She was going to have to hack a Mafia server to save her own life, and she had 3 hours to do it. The penthouse office of Costa Global Holdings transformed into a war room. The storm outside lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows, rain drumming a frantic, irregular beat that perfectly matched the racing of Emma's pulse. The digital clock in the corner of her primary monitor glared in harsh red numerals, 9:15 p.m. They had less than 3 hours before Ivan Petrov expected $50 million, or a ledger proving its existence. Emma's fingers flew across her mechanical keyboard, the rapid clack-clack-clack echoing in the tense silence. She had stripped off her emerald green blazer, hanging it over the back of her ergonomic chair. The short sleeves of her silk blouse clung to her thick, soft arms, the fabric damp with a nervous sweat. She felt entirely exposed, acutely aware of her large, plush body occupying the space, and even more aware of the dangerous predator pacing slowly behind her. Gabriel had not left her side. He had poured them both a glass of Macallan 25 from his private stash, setting one gently near her mousepad. He was watching her screen, but more often she could feel the heavy, heated weight of his gaze tracking the curve of her shoulders, the dip of her spine, and the generous swell of her hips pressing against the confines of her chair. The deletion protocol Arthur used was a military-grade 0-byte overwrite, Emma muttered, her eyes darting between scrolling lines of terminal code. "It doesn't just put the file in the trash. It actively writes zeros over the physical sectors of the hard drive where the data used to live. It's the digital equivalent of burning a document, and then scattering the ashes in a hurricane." "So it's gone," Gabriel said. His voice was calm, but the undercurrent of lethal tension was undeniable. He stepped closer, leaning over her shoulder, his broad chest brushed against her back, the heat of him seeping through her thin blouse. The intoxicating scent of tobacco, vanilla, and rain clouded her senses, making her head spin. "No," Emma said, her voice shaking slightly, though whether from fear of the Petrovs or the proximity of the Mafia boss, she wasn't sure. Data always leaves a shadow if you know where to shine the light. She closed her eyes for a fraction of a second, centering herself. She wasn't just a fat girl who liked baking and romance novels anymore. She was Emma Gallagher, the architect of Costa Global's digital fortress. She opened her eyes, a fierce determination replacing the panic. "Arthur is arrogant," she reasoned aloud, her hands resuming their rapid dance across the keys. "He's a numbers guy, not a hacker. He used a pre-packaged script to delete the ledger, which means he didn't write it himself. If he's stealing $50 million, he needs that ledger just as much as you do to route the funds through the offshore accounts. He wouldn't destroy the only map to the treasure without making a copy first." Gabriel's hand came to rest on the back of her chair. "Go on. I'm bypassing the standard OS and booting into a forensic diagnostic tool, Emma explained. She pulled up a command line interface, utilizing a specialized packet-sniffing software she had discreetly installed months ago. I'm going to run a deep packet inspection of the network traffic exactly 3 seconds before the deletion command was executed. She hit enter. A wall of text cascaded down the screen in a dizzying blur of green and black. Emma leaned closer, her sharp eyes scanning the chaos for anomalies. "There," she gasped, her thick finger pointing to a specific IP routing log. "Right there." Before the local file was wiped, the system executed a compressed data burst out of the network. Gabriel leaned in closer, his cheek brushing against her hair. Where did it go? It bounced through 3 proxy servers. Emma traced the route, her heart leaping into her throat. But the final destination IP belongs to a private server cluster leased by a shell corporation, Ironclad Securities. It's a front used by Kroll, the private corporate intelligence firm. Gabriel went perfectly rigid. The mention of the real, notoriously secretive risk consulting firm made the blood drain from his face. Kroll. Arthur hired Kroll contractors last year to audit our legitimate shipping routes. He must have kept a back door open on their encrypted servers to hide the Petrov ledger. He backed it up, Emma confirmed, a triumphant smile breaking through her terror. The ledger still exists. It's sitting on a server in a Kroll data center, waiting for Arthur to use it. Can you pull it back? Gabriel demanded. Emma rapidly typed a series of penetration commands, trying to establish a handshake with the remote server. A glaring red access denid box popped up demanding a 256-bit encryption key. She slumped back in her chair, the adrenaline crashing. No, it's locked behind a physical hardware key, an RSA token or a YubiKey. Unless we have the physical device Arthur used to encrypt the tunnel, Kroll's servers will lock us out permanently after 3 failed attempts. Gabriel straightened up, his dark eyes narrowing as he stared out the rain-slicked window toward the glittering Chicago skyline. Arthur didn't take it with him. I have TSA contacts monitoring O'Hare and Midway. My men reported he bypassed standard security and chartered a private jet, but he was forced to go through a private electronic sweep. If he had a piece of encrypted hardware on him, my perimeter alarms would have flagged it before he even left the building. So it's still here, Emma breathed, her eyes widening. He hid the key in the building. Gabriel looked down at her. His gaze was dark, dangerous, and utterly captivating. It's in his office. Come with me. He extended a large, calloused hand toward her. Emma hesitated for a moment, looking at his palm. This was the hand of a man who ordered executions, who ruled the Chicago underworld with an iron fist. But right now it was an anchor. She placed her soft, trembling hand in his strong fingers wrapped around hers, pulling her up from the chair with effortless strength. As she stood, the close proximity forced her plush breasts against his solid chest, her thick thighs brushing his tailored trousers. Gabriel didn't step back. Instead, his free hand came up, his thumb grazing her lower lip. "You are magnificent, Emma," he murmured, the raw honesty in his voice making her knees weak. "When this is over, you and I are going to have a very long conversation about the future." Before she could process the weight of his words, he turned, keeping her hand firmly in his, and led her out of the penthouse office and into the dark, silent corridors of the 42nd floor. The hallway outside Gabriel's office was completely dark, save for the emergency exit signs casting a sickly red glow against the polished marble floors. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the sound of the storm outside, and the sharp click of Gabriel's Italian leather shoes and Emma's sensible flats. Arthur Pendleton's office was located at the opposite end of the executive suite, a corner office that boasted panoramic views of Lake Michigan. As they approached the heavy glass door, Gabriel released Emma's hand and reached inside his jacket, withdrawing a sleek, suppressed 9mm handgun. Emma swallowed a gasp, her heart hammering against her ribs. Seeing the gun made the reality of the situation horrifyingly tangible. "Stay behind me," Gabriel ordered, his voice barely a whisper. He stepped up to the biometric scanner beside Arthur's door. Instead of scanning his fingerprint, he pulled a small master override keycard from his wallet and swiped it. The lock clicked, flashing green. Gabriel pushed the door open, sweeping the dark room with the barrel of his weapon. "Clear," he muttered, stepping inside and lowering the gun. Emma followed him immediately, moving to the heavy velvet drapes and pulling them shut to prevent any light from spilling out into the city night. She flipped on a small desk lamp. Arthur's office was meticulously organized, almost sterile. There were no personal photos, no plants, no signs of life. It was the office of a man who planned to leave without a trace. "Start looking," Gabriel said, rapidly opening the filing cabinets and tossing folders onto the floor. "Look for a false bottom in the drawers, a hollowed-out book, a loose floorboard. We need a USB drive or an RSA hardware token." Emma moved to the massive mahogany desk. She was hyper-aware of her own body, the way her thick thighs rubbed together as she crouched down to inspect the underside of the desk. She felt clumsy and large in the sleek, modern space, but she pushed the insecurities aside. Her life depended on her brain right now, not her dress size. She ran her hands along the edges of the drawers, feeling for any irregularities. Nothing. She moved to the bookshelf, pulling down heavy legal tomes and shaking them. "Nothing. Gabriel," Emma said, panting slightly from the exertion. "Arthur is paranoid. He wouldn't leave the key to $50 million in a desk drawer. He has a wall safe. I saw the installation order cross my desk 6 months ago. It's supposed to be behind the abstract painting on the south wall." Gabriel immediately crossed the room, grabbing the heavy wooden frame of the massive, ugly abstract painting that dominated the wall. With a sharp pull, he ripped it off the wall and tossed it onto the leather sofa. Behind it sat a flush, stainless steel wall safe. It had a digital keypad and a biometric thumbprint scanner. "Damn it!" Gabriel hissed, striking the wall beside the safe with his fist. "It requires dual authentication, a passcode and his thumbprint. We have neither." Emma stared at the keypad, her mind racing. "Wait, the Kroll servers have a fail-safe protocol for corporate audits. If an executive is incapacitated, a secondary override code can bypass the biometrics, provided it's entered from the local network. Do you know the override?" Gabriel asked, looking at her with a mixture of hope and burning intensity. "No, but I know Arthur," Emma said, stepping up to the safe. The space between the wall and the heavy oak desk was incredibly narrow. As she squeezed past Gabriel to reach the keypad, the plush curve of her stomach and the generous swell of her hips dragged heavily against his hard torso and thighs. Gabriel's breath hitched. His free hand instinctively came up, gripping her thick waist, his fingers digging possessively into the soft flesh through the silk of her dress. He didn't move away. He held her firmly against him, turning a moment of tight logistics into a scorching, intimate embrace. "Gabriel," she whispered, her voice trembling, her face inches from his. "Focus, Miyakara," he rasped, his eyes dark and heavy as they stared down at her lips. "Open the safe." Emma forced her eyes back to the keypad. She could barely think with his massive, hot body pressed flush against her curves, his thumb stroking the soft indentation of her waist. Arthur is obsessed with legacy," Emma stammered, trying to regulate her breathing. "He uses his dog's name for his email, but for financial encryption. He uses his grandmother's maiden name and her birth year. It's a pattern I noticed when I filed his expense reports." She typed the numeric equivalent of CAVANAUGH1942 into the keypad. The screen blinked red. "Error. 2 attempts remaining." "Shit," Emma cursed. "That wasn't it." "Think, Bia." Gabriel encouraged softly, his grip on her waist tightening just enough to ground her. What else does he value more than money? Emma closed her eyes. What does Arthur value? He hates Gabriel. He hates the syndicate. He thinks he's smarter than everyone else. He's an elitist. Her eyes snapped open. His alma mater. He never stops talking about his secret society at Yale. Skull and Bones. Their founding year. She quickly typed 3221-832. The keypad beeped. The screen flashed a brilliant green, and the heavy steel bolts inside the door clanked loudly as they retracted. The safe door swung open. "You beautiful, brilliant woman," Gabriel breathed, pressing a hard, sudden kiss against her temple. Emma reached into the safe. Sitting on a velvet shelf was a black YubiKey hardware token and a burner cell phone. She grabbed the token, a surge of triumphant adrenaline washing over her. "I got it!" she cried, turning in the tight space to face Gabriel, inadvertently pressing her heavy breasts flat against his chest. "I have the key. I can pull the ledger back from Kroll." Gabriel smiled, a genuine, breathtaking smile that transformed his ruthless face. "Let's go save my empire, and then I am taking you to dinner." Before they could take a step toward the door, the sharp, shrill ring of the burner phone inside the safe shattered the moment. Emma froze. Gabriel's smile vanished instantly, replaced by a mask of cold, deadly fury. He reached around Emma, his chest dragging against hers, and pulled the ringing burner phone from the safe. The caller ID was a scrambled international number. Gabriel answered it, putting it on speaker. He didn't say a word. "Arthur?" A heavy, thick Russian accent came through the tiny speaker. It was Ivan Petrov. "I hope you are calling to tell me the transfer is complete. I am growing impatient." Gabriel's eyes met Emma's. The air in the room turned to ice. "Arthur is unavailable, Ivan," Gabriel said, his voice a low, terrifying rumble. A heavy silence fell over the line. Then, a dark, rumbling laugh echoed from the phone. "Gabriel Costa," Petrov mused. "How unfortunate. If you have Arthur's phone, that means you have discovered his little betrayal, which also means you know the ledger has been destroyed." "The ledger is intact," Gabriel lied smoothly. "You will have your money at midnight, as agreed." "Midnight?" Petrov laughed again, a cruel, mocking sound. "Plans have changed, Gabriel. I do not like being played with. My men are already in the lobby of your building. They are coming up the elevators now. You have exactly 10 minutes to produce the 50 million, or they will burn your beautiful tower to the ground, with you inside it." The line went dead. Emma felt the blood drain from her face. 10 minutes. The sudden, horrifying ding of the elevator down the hall echoed through the silent office suite. Heavy boots stepped onto the marble floor. They weren't alone anymore. Heavy boots hammered against the marble floor of the reception area, a chaotic rhythm that sent violent vibrations through the soles of Emma's shoes. There were at least 6 men out there, moving with military precision. The storm outside raged on, thunder masking the precise location of the intruders, but the aggressive sweep of tactical flashlights cutting through the darkness of the corridor gave them away. Gabriel's hand shot out in the dark, his large, calloused palm clamping securely around Emma's forearm. He didn't yank her, he grounded her. His grip was an iron promise of survival. "We need to get back to your terminal," Gabriel whispered, his lips grazing the shell of her ear. The sharp, metallic scent of the suppressed 9mm pistol in his right hand mixed heavily with his cologne. "The Kroll portal requires your specific network node to authenticate the YubiKey. Can you run?" Emma looked down at her sensibly heeled flats, then at the thick plush curve of her legs beneath the emerald silk dress. She had never been a runner. Her body was built for comfort, for taking up space, not for tactical sprints across a 42nd floor war zone. But as the beam of a flashlight sliced across the frosted glass of Arthur's office door, the raw, primal instinct to live overrode her insecurities. "I can run," she breathed, tightening her fist around the small, hard plastic of the hardware token. Stay low. Keep your body against the wall. Do not stop until you are behind the solid oak door of my office, Gabriel commanded. Without waiting for a response, Gabriel kicked the heavy glass door of Arthur's office open. It rebounded off the wall with a deafening crash, instantly drawing the attention of the Russian hitmen down the hall. There, a voice shouted in thick Russian. Gabriel stepped fully into the corridor, raising his weapon. The suppressed gun spit deadly fire, the muzzle flashes briefly illuminating the grim, ruthless lines of his face. A heavy thud echoed down the hall as the lead hitman dropped to the marble floor. "Go, Emma, now!" Gabriel roared, providing covering fire as the remaining intruders scrambled for cover behind the heavy mahogany reception desks. Emma moved. She threw her weight forward, her thighs burning as she pushed herself into a dead sprint down the dimly lit hallway. Her breath came in short, jagged gasps, her full breasts bouncing heavily against her chest with every frantic step. The emerald silk of her dress snapped around her legs. She felt massive, a large, moving target in the narrow corridor, but the adrenaline flooding her veins numbed the fear. Gunfire erupted behind her. It wasn't the quiet spit of Gabriel's weapon. It was the deafening, percussive roar of unsuppressed automatic rifles. The sound tore through the air, vibrating deep in Emma's molars. Drywall exploded to her left, showering her shoulder with fine white dust and plaster shards. She ducked lower, her hand sliding along the cold, smooth wall for balance. The 60 yards to the executive suite felt like 60 miles. She could hear Gabriel moving backward behind her, his heavy footsteps steady and controlled. He was acting as a human shield, placing his broad, muscular body directly between the onslaught of bullets and her retreating form. "Keep moving, Mia Cara," Gabriel barked, reloading his weapon with a sharp, mechanical snap. Emma rounded the corner into the outer executive suite, her lungs screaming for oxygen. She threw her weight against the heavy oak door of Gabriel's office, stumbling inside. She caught her balance against the edge of her desk, her chest heaving violently, sweat slicking the back of her neck. Seconds later, Gabriel backed into the room. He slammed the heavy oak door shut and instantly threw the deadbolt. With a grunt of exertion, he grabbed a massive, solid brass filing cabinet and dragged it across the carpet, wedging it firmly against the door handle. "Are you hit?" Gabriel demanded, abandoning the barricade and closing the distance between them in 2 long strides. He didn't wait for her to answer. His large hands roved frantically over her arms, her waist, tracing the plush curves of her hips and thighs, searching for any sign of injury. "No," Emma gasped, catching his wrists to stop his frantic searching. Her heart was hammering against his palms. I'm okay. Gabriel let out a harsh, ragged breath, his forehead dropping to rest against hers. "Start the terminal, Emma. They have breaching tools. That door will buy us 5 minutes maximum." As if on cue, a hail of automatic gunfire slammed into the heavy oak door. The dense wood splintered but held, the brass filing cabinet vibrating with the force of the impact. Emma shoved away from the intoxicating heat of Gabriel's body and dropped into her ergonomic chair. She was shaking so violently she missed the USB port on her first attempt. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, she aligned the YubiKey and slotted it directly into the motherboard tower. A green light blinked to life on the small device. Her fingers hit the keyboard, flying across the keys with a frantic, desperate precision. The sensory overload of the room was immense. The acrid tang of drywall dust, the deafening cracks of bullets hitting the door, the heat of the computer tower warming her shins, and Gabriel, standing directly behind her, his gun leveled at the door, an immovable mountain of lethal protection. "Key recognized," Emma muttered, a terminal window popping up on her center monitor. "Establishing a secure tunnel to Kroll's offshore cluster. Handshake protocol initiated." Faster, Gabriel gritted out. It's a 256-bit encryption, Gabriel. I can't make the math go any faster. Emma snapped back, her voice tight with panic. The terminal screen went black for a terrifying second, before a stylized logo of an iron shield appeared. Kroll Secure Certs. Enter after Verarchen. Emma bypassed the graphical interface, bringing up the command line. She manually requested a pull of the most recent data packet sent from Arthur's IP address. I have the directory, she said, her eyes scanning the green text. It's a massive file. He didn't just back up the Petrov ledger. He backed up 10 years of your syndicate's routing numbers. Pull the Petrov ledger and drop the rest, Gabriel ordered, his eyes never leaving the splintering oak door. Even is a creature of simple transactions. He doesn't care about the history. He only cares about his 50 million. Emma isolated the specific ledger file. She hit download. A progress bar appeared on the screen, a thin blue line creeping painfully slow across a sea of gray. 10%. A heavy, resounding boom shook the office walls. The Russians had stopped shooting and brought up a battering ram. The brass filing cabinet groaned, sliding half an inch across the thick carpet. 25%. Gabriel, Emma whispered, staring at the screen. The reality of the situation was settling heavy in her chest. If they breach that door before this hits 100%. They won't, Gabriel said. He reached down without looking, his free hand finding her shoulder. His long fingers squeezed her soft flesh, a fierce, protective grounding. I will not let them touch you. I swear it on my life. 40%, another massive boom. The top hinge of the oak door snapped, the heavy wood leaning inward. The blue progress bar mocked them, crawling forward at an agonizingly sluggish pace. 55%. The network traffic is being bottlenecked by the storm, Emma realized, panic lacing her voice. The microwave receivers on the roof are losing packet integrity in the heavy rain. Gabriel didn't respond to the technical problem. He was an operator of physical force, and right now his entire world was narrowed down to the splintering doorway and the woman sitting beneath him. He adjusted his stance, his muscular thighs bracing for impact, his suppressed 9mm raised and aimed precisely at chest height. 65%, Emma called out, her voice cracking. Boom! The bottom hinge of the door gave way with a violent screech of tearing metal. The heavy, brass filing cabinet tipped backward, crashing onto the rug. The Russians were one strike away from flooding the room. Gabriel's hand left Emma's shoulder. He moved with terrifying speed, dragging a heavy leather armchair in front of Emma's desk to shield her from the inevitable spray of bullets. Keep your head down, Gabriel roared. 80%, the door exploded inward. 3 men in tactical gear poured through the shattered frame, raising their weapons. Gabriel fired thrice in rapid succession. 2 men dropped instantly, their armor failing to stop the close range. Armor-piercing rounds Gabriel had loaded. The 3rd man fired a wild burst from his rifle. Emma screamed, dropping below the heavy mahogany desk. A row of expensive monitors shattered on the far wall, raining glass and sparks onto the floor. Gabriel lunged forward, closing the distance before the 3rd man could correct his aim. Gabriel's large hand clamped around the barrel of the hot rifle, shoving it violently toward the ceiling. With his other hand, he drove the butt of his pistol brutally into the Russian's jaw. The sickening crunch of bone echoed through the room. The man collapsed in a heap. Gabriel! Emma screamed from under the desk, staring up at the lone surviving monitor. 99%. Download complete. I have it, she cried, scrambling up from the floor, her dress caught under her knee, ignoring the sharp sting of a glass shard slicing her calf. Gabriel stood panting over the unconscious bodies, his white dress shirt speckled with drywall dust and dark stains. He holstered his weapon and strode back to the desk. Route the money to the offshore escrow, Gabriel ordered, his chest heaving, his dark eyes ablaze. and send the ledger directly to Ivan's encrypted phone. Do it now. Emma's thick fingers flew across the keyboard. She executed a forced transfer protocol, bypassing standard banking delays by utilizing the syndicate's dark web tumbling nodes. The $50 million vanished from Costa Global's holding accounts and materialized securely in the Petrov's Cayman escrow. Transfer complete, she breathed. She'd attached the raw ledger data to an encrypted messaging app on the desktop, inputting the international number that had called the burner phone. She typed a single sentence, "Transaction verified." "Stand down," she hit send. The silence that followed was suffocating. The only sounds in the room were the ragged breathing of the two survivors, the hiss of the rain against the glass, and the hum of the cooling fans on Emma's computer tower. Gabriel reached into his pocket and pulled out Arthur's burner phone. He placed it on the pristine blotter of Emma's desk. They waited 10 seconds, 20 seconds. The phone vibrated, lighting up the dark desk. Gabriel answered it, putting it on speaker. "Well," Ivan Petrov's thick voice rumbled through the speaker. "It appears your technical difficulties have been resolved, Gabriel. The funds have cleared, and the ledger is pristine." "Call your dogs off, Ivan," Gabriel said, his voice dangerously low, "before I decide to take my money back out of your hide." A dark chuckle echoed from the phone. "My men are withdrawing. Consider our business," concluded Costa, "and my apologies for the mess in your beautiful office." The line clicked dead. Emma stared at the phone. The adrenaline that had been keeping her upright suddenly evaporated, leaving her feeling hollowed out and incredibly heavy. Her knees buckled. She expected to hit the floor, but large, strong arms wrapped around her waist, catching her effortlessly. Gabriel pulled her flush against his chest, burying his face in the soft crook of her neck. He breathed in deeply, his large hands gripping her thick hips as if she were the only solid thing left in the world. "You did it," Gabriel murmured against her skin, the vibration of his voice sending a hot shudder down her spine. "You saved us." Emma wrapped her arms around his broad, muscular shoulders, clinging to him. The scent of gunpowder and raw male power enveloped her completely. She could feel the rapid beating of his heart against her plush chest. "Arthur," she whispered, her voice muffled against his ruined dress shirt. "Arthur is a dead man walking," Gabriel promised softly, pulling back just enough to look at her. His dark eyes swept over her face, taking in the smudged mascara, the sweat-dampened hair, and the fierce, undeniable strength burning in her eyes. "My men will find him. But right now, I don't care about Arthur. I only care about you." He cupped her face, his thumbs gently stroking her flushed cheeks. He didn't look at her like she was an assistant. He didn't look at her like she was a fat girl from the South Side. He looked at her like she was a queen. "I told you," Gabriel whispered, his gaze dropping to her trembling lips. "If you found that ledger, I was going to keep you." Emma's breath hitched. "Gabriel, you can't just—" He cut off her protest, leaning down and capturing her mouth in a searing, possessive kiss. It wasn't gentle. It was acclaiming. All the pent-up tension, fear, and dark obsession poured into the contact. His large hands slid from her cheeks down to her waist, dragging her closer, letting her feel exactly how much he wanted her. Emma melted against him, her hands tangling in his dark hair. The taste of fine whiskey and danger intoxicated her. In the ruins of a Mafia battlefield, surrounded by shattered glass and broken doors, the quiet, sensible assistant finally vanished forever. She had hacked a syndicate, survived a hit squad, and won the terrifying devotion of Chicago's most dangerous man. Gabriel pulled back slowly, pressing his forehead against hers, a slow, predatory smile touching his lips. "Tomorrow," he murmured, his hands resting securely on her waist, "you are getting a very large promotion." And just like that, Emma transformed from an invisible assistant into the queen of Gabriel Costa's dark empire. She proved that brilliant minds and undeniable courage come in all shapes and sizes, and that sometimes deleting the wrong file is exactly what you need to start the right fire. If you loved this intense, pulse-pounding mafia romance and want to hear more stories where brilliant, curvy women take charge and win the hearts of dangerous men, you know what to do. Hit that like button. Share this video with your fellow romance readers. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new thrilling story. Drop a comment below and tell me, what would you do if you accidentally deleted a mob boss's secret file? See you in the next one.